Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. Hopefully, everyone can hear me okay. My name is Joe, and I'm the community manager here at Raise.dev. And today, this is the first of one of our free shows today, and we've got a very special guest joining us very shortly. So, to kick things off, I just want to briefly tell you what we're here to do and what this show is all about. But before I do that, a couple of notes and warnings for folks who are new to the show and new to our Twitch channel. During the show, if you've got any questions, you can throw them in the chat. That's totally encouraged. And additionally, if you've got any links or URLs you want to share, maybe GitHub links about projects that are similar to what we're talking about, or your own projects, anything like that, you are very welcome to share those. But please give me a warning in the chat by @raised devs first, so that I can make sure our moderation bot doesn't ban you. If you post a URL in the chat without that, you will be banned. So please give me a heads up if you want to post any links. And other than that, Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. What is this? Why are we here? This show is all about getting you the help you need to be successful this Hacktoberfest. Hacktoberfest is a celebration of open source. It's about making great contributions to projects that need the hand, or projects that can offer a great first contributing opportunity to people looking to get into open source this Hacktoberfest. And so we're here to give you the help you need with doing that. And that can mean you ask us a question. So we have a way that you can submit questions to the show. For example, if you are stuck with a particular contribution, or say you can't find a good project to contribute to, you can submit questions to raise.dev/Hacktoberfest, and we'll review those questions and answer them here live on the show and send you the recording after. It can also mean you turn up on the day and ask questions in chat. We're covering lots of topics around Hacktoberfest. So, for example, yesterday we heard from Floor Dries about how to do good documentation contributions. We had later on in the day, we had the Dev2 team on the show talking about accessibility and contributing to forum. So we're doing lots of different, trying to show you lots of different projects you can get involved in, and trying to show you lots of different parts of open source to inspire you to make your first contribution this October. So why are Raise.devs doing this? Why are we doing this show? We started about a week ago, actually. We launched last Tuesday. Time flies, over a week ago now. And we are a service to help you level up in your developer career. Whether it's your first developer job, your second developer job, you're trying to get a promotion, or you're trying to finish off a project, we are here to help you get the experience you need through coaching. Basically, you sign up for our service and we match you with an expert coach who will work with you to achieve your goals. And whilst we're in early access, you can sign up for free at raise.dev for that kickoff call with a coach and to spend some time with our lovely coaches. If you want to hear more about Raise.dev and how it all works, there is a video in our highlights called Bridging the Developer Experience Gap. You'll be able to find that on our Twitch channel in the highlights, where we have a chat with our founder and go through how Raise.dev works, and why Raise.dev exists, and all those lovely things. So you can find that in the channel. So I said this show is the first of 3 shows. I'll go through who else we've got coming on the week and in the day at the end of the show. But in the meantime, if you're super curious, you can go to twitch.tv raised schedule to see who we've got coming up later on in the day. So all that leaves me to do is to introduce our wonderful guest for the day. I will add him to the stage and let him do his own introduction, because when I introduce people, then they always want to repeat the things I say, and it's all very confusing. So please welcome Sanskar to the show. Hey Sanskar, how you doing?
Hi everyone, I'm doing good.
Awesome. So, do you want to introduce yourself to the folks and tell people a little bit of, I guess, what you're up to and why you're here today?
Okay, so my name is Sanskar. I'm a senior year student at Delhi Technological University. I've been a developer since I was 12 years of age. But most importantly, I'm an open source enthusiast who has a special feeling towards community. So I work as a GitHub campus expert at my university, and I sometimes mentor students at Udacity. I was also an MLH fellow, and I have been a part of Google Summer of Code as a student and as a mentor at Forsacia.
Fantastic. That's super good. So, okay, there's so many things I want to ask you about, because aside from being a student in Delhi, you're part of so many different mentorship and learning communities like MLH Fellows, GitHub Campus Experts, Google Summer of Code, and there's a lot of those things that I know folks in the audience are curious about. So we want to go through your developer journey later on in the show as well. We're going to look at a project that you work on, Incogly. Am I pronouncing that right? Incogly.
Yeah.
Um, So we're doing the show in two halves. So first of all, we're going to hear about Sanskar's developer journey, about how he got into all these things, what the MLH Fellowship is, what Google Summer of Code is, and how he got involved. And then towards the end, to the second half of the show, we're going to dive into a project that Sanskar works on called Incogly, which if I can pitch it for you, because I had to look at it this morning, I was very excited when you sent this to me. It's basically a tool to reduce implicit bias in video calls and other interviews. And it's super rad. So I'm very excited to talk about that. So let's start with your developer journey. So you said you started coding when you were 12. What brought you to coding at that age? Like, what were you doing? Like, what inspired you to start coding?
So whenever a kid is like a 10 to 12-year-old, he tries to pursue sports, right? But I was like very terrible at sports. So
Hmm.
I wanted to do something at least. So I had this uncle who was at the time working at Turbo C++. So if you
Right.
remember, we had these dark blue compilers with white screen and a person blinking.
Right.
And I thought, wow, he's a hacker. So I used to just like nag him, teach me something, teach me something, and teach me something. So
Hmm.
he taught me like this very clever trick where you could just convert a Word document to a HTML file and you would get a web page.
Okay. Cool. Right. So I guess that's
So
like when you do like the file export and export as like HTML.
yeah,
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
yeah. So that is when I like got wow. Now I like drag and drop the Google image on my Word
Yeah.
document and I was like, now I'm just this close to like creating Google myself.
Right. Yeah.
At
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
time it was. So yeah, then incrementally I started programming, went to communities, found some mentors in my university who helped me through my journey, and this is basically how my journey to programming began.
That's awesome. That's so like starting from there with like exporting Word into HTML is so funny. It reminds me of like the first websites I ever made were on Microsoft Front Page, which I don't even think is a thing anymore. And then like Dreamweaver was a thing for a long time, and it feels like WYSIWYG like web editing was what was the HTML output of Word like? Like I imagine that code must have been a mess.
Yeah, you couldn't actually read it. It was just a single line of HTML in a single like.
Amazing. Does Microsoft Word still do that? I don't have Microsoft Word, so I can't check. I know Google Drive, Google Docs will export the HTML. Super cool. Okay, cool. So you joined university, and I'm guessing you're studying CS or computer engineering or.
No, no, actually, I'm majoring in electrical, and it's
Cool,
like
awesome.
not even related to computer science at my
Right.
university.
Interesting, interesting. So what the what kind of how so I imagine you're also doing a lot of like hardware stuff in that class. What kind of programming are you doing or touching on in that degree?
So it's actually very funny because we aren't taught any kind of programming in at my university. And my
Right.
like field of major is completely unrelated to computer science.
Mm,
It's like core machinery, like transformers, like
interesting.
all the generators.
Yeah. Huh. Fascinating. Okay, so that opens up like a wealth of questions. So you're not doing a lot of it in your degree. So where are you going to learn about code? Because obviously I mean, I've seen some of your projects. You're in the MLH Fellows. You're a software developer. So well, where are you learning?
So the story begins when I joined my university and I was
Yeah.
attending a class by my mentor. So we had these classes where the university seniors they taught about what's going on in the community and so on. So
Mm,
my mentor called Madhav, he's not very famous, but he introduced me to open source.
cool.
And when in India you basically join a university, there's like some companies like to discriminate based on majors.
Yeah.
That's like very unfortunate. But he told me that open source doesn't care. Like you may be a CS major, electrical major, you may be like 40 years old, you may be 10 years old. If you know how to code, they'll be like greeting you with open arms. So
Yeah.
that is how I got into open source, and I realized the importance of like going to communities and communicating. Since like as software engineers, it's not usually highlighted how important communication is, right? We are
Right.
like
Right. Right.
basically just taught you must do this, you must like invert binary trees, you must create distributed systems.
Yeah.
but but no one actually emphasizes the fact that communication is as equally important as your computer science knowledge to succeed.
For sure.
These, yeah.
Interesting. So when he first got you into open source, like how did he do that? Was he trying to get you into a particular project, or was he just like showing you like what's out there and what's available, or?
Oh, he was just like showing his developer journey,
Yeah.
and I was inspired. Since he's also not a computer science major,
Right,
he
right.
majors in physics.
Awesome.
I thought, wow,
That's super
it's a
cool.
very beautiful community that you get to work in production level code, and once like when your first PR gets merged, it's like
Mhm.
the feeling is almost like you rediscovered something.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a feeling we hope lots of people have this Hacktoberfest. Um, Cool. So you mentioned like getting into developer communities, and obviously, I know that you're involved in quite a few, given that we met at a hackathon in India late last year. What kind of I just mentioned hackathons. That's one type of developer community. What kind of developer communities are you involved in, and like how have those different communities helped you on your journey?
So I've been a part of many communities at my university. We have various small student groups. Then I've been a part of Microsoft Student Partners. I've been a
Cool.
part of GitHub Campus Experts. So
Yeah, yeah,
what? Yeah,
yeah.
and I've also regularly attend like Google developer groups events
Cool.
that happen at my locality. So
Yeah.
the importance of these communities is firstly you get to meet a lot of people of different backgrounds. So
Mm.
if I wouldn't have like talked to people since I started programming in my school, I would have been still working with jQuery.
Right,
But
right. Which
when I
is
talk to
fine, by the
other,
way. jQuery's
yeah,
great, but we've got
yeah,
some new things that you can learn. Yeah.
exactly. So, uh, so when I came to university, my mentor told me there's this thing called React, which is
Hmm.
like the popular thing now. You may
Right.
want to explore it, and then you meet new people in university in like these meetups. They tell you that we are working on these code drops, awesome like awards-winning projects. You can have a look there. So basically, talking to different people gives you like a broad mindset, and you are not like isolated through to something that's like restricted to your university or locality.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Cool. That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned GitHub Campus Experts. For folks who don't know, and I'm going to try not to shill for myself here because I worked on that program. For folks who don't know, like what is that, and like how did that like interact with your learning at this point?
So GitHub Campus Expert is a program that is sponsored by GitHub to basically promote communities at your locality, be it your university, be it your local state or city. It's basically a program where GitHub helps you foster new communities in your locality. So, so it really helped me. One, because the GitHub Campus Expert community is very fruitful and very supporting. So you meet new people and you get to interact with a lot of people. And the feeling of like creating a community is very like unlike anything that I had experienced before. Because
Right.
because when I was a student, I was very scared of talking in public or like giving talks.
Right.
But as a campus expert, since you have to foster communities and since you have to like eventually you will have to give talks and you have to interact with people. So being a part of that community like helped me reduce that fear that I had, and
Hmm.
it also gave me a lot of opportunities to give talks. And the only way to get good at something is like to continuously practice it.
Right. Right. Awesome.
So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of continually practicing things, so you also joined the MLH Fellows this summer. Do you want to briefly? I want to ask about the hackathon projects you did at MLH Fellows because I read your blog post about MLH Fellows and it sounds like you didn't just do the project you were assigned. You also ended up working on like a bunch of stuff, which is super cool. But first of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about MLH Fellows and like why you joined that program?
Yeah. So MLH fellowship was like a very almost a blessing for me
Hmm.
since due to COVID I had this internship, but it was cancelled due to COVID.
Right. Which
So MLH,
so many students had that problem.
yeah. So
That's
MLH fellowship came like a blessing for me.
yeah.
I talked to my friends at GitHub, like Juan, Yashovardhan.
Mhm.
I actually met Yashovardhan at a open source event. So like
Cool.
the power of open source. And they like,
That's awesome.
guided me to this fellowship called MLH Fellowship, where
Mhm.
you'll be like working on large scale open source projects, and
Right.
even you will be get a stipend. So I am a person who is like a bit against like free internships because it
Right.
feels like free labors,
Yeah, for
but they
sure. Absolutely. Friends, don't take free internships. You don't need to. There are so many paid opportunities out there. Don't do work for free.
yeah.
um, yeah. Sorry. Go on.
Yeah. So they, they allot you some mentors. They help you throughout the journey. They like basically guide you or channel you to your introduction to open source and working on large scale projects,
Cool.
which I got to work on the React Native project, which was like unheard of for me. If
That's
you have read my
amazing. Yeah.
project.
Yeah. That's super cool. So, you mentioned that you got mentored. So, that we mentioned before on this show, just to bring it in here, folks who aren't aware, a lot of the coaches on the MLH Fellowship are the coaches from Raise.dev. So, I think you worked with Yanni, was that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome, cool.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about being coached by Yanni? Yanni is an amazing developer from the London, I guess, JavaScript community. I haven't been lucky enough to permanently to personally meet him yet. I just follow him on Twitter. So what was that like? What was your relationship with your coach throughout the project?
It was an amazing experience actually. So first time it was like we were working on such a large team because all my previous internships have been like two people, three people, or a
Right.
single person working on a single project. And
Yeah.
since we have a large team, we actually required a lot of thought process so that the team could bond and vibe well. And with Yanni, he also had these philosophical sessions where he would like
Right.
tell you how you don't actually have to just code and be a code monkey. Actually,
Right.
there's a lot of things that are apart from coding. You need to vibe with your team because a team that bonds together only performs together. Then you must actually interact with them. And
Yeah.
finally, he also gave us a lot of code reviews, which helped us like push industry level codes to the repository because otherwise it wouldn't have been accepted. That also helped us eventually
Oh,
become
I think
better engineers ourselves.
I think we're losing you a little bit. Do you want to repeat that last line? You broke up a little bit there.
So yeah, we got rigorous code reviews that so
Yeah.
we were able to like ship industry level code, eventually making us
Cool.
better
Yeah. Yeah.
engineers and getting us acquainted with best practices.
Awesome. Yeah, and like speaking of industrial level code, like there isn't much more like serious than React Native on a Facebook project work like as a student. That's super neat. So how many there was so the students arranged into pods, right? How many people were in your pod?
So we were one of the largest pods. We had like
Yeah.
a 6 member pod,
Yeah.
and then we were increased to a 8 member pod.
Cool.
Yeah. But
Very nice.
on an average, it's like 4 to 6 people.
Cool. And so what was like your so obviously this is a super new experience both for like MLH, our coaches, and also for you because you were expecting like at the beginning of the summer to be in an office working with like a team in person, I guess, throughout the whole summer, and then you end up working in a pod with people and mentors for all over the world. What was your like day to day work like? Like how did I imagine there was an element of like asynchronous working going on where you were assigned tasks, maybe like not necessarily like when you started work because your mentor's on a different time zone to you and that kind of thing. So
Right.
how did it actually work in practice?
So actually, it went really well because I'm a night owl myself. So I'm coding
Right.
throughout the night, and I'll be sleeping through a major part of the morning.
Nice.
and and our stand-ups used to start at like 1 p.m. So it was
Yeah.
like a perfect time for me. I
Right.
used to, and I believe most of my teammates were night owls as well. So we used to, but it doesn't matter actually because
Yeah.
you can work asynchronously. You need to be present at your
Right.
stand-up time. You basically discuss what's like what you plan to do throughout the day, what you did
Cool.
yesterday, and basically all your general stand up. And
Nice.
there was one element of fun with MLH that you weren't actually just coding. You had these talks by awesome speakers throughout the night,
Cool.
like the our Indian night.
Yeah.
So we used to like code for some part. We used to attend these awesome talks, and we used to
Yeah.
code again, or we used to just chill out together. And finally, that is how our code ends.
That's awesome. That sounds really nice. I think one of the like especially towards the beginning of the summer, a lot of people were really missing out on that face-to-face interaction. I think now everyone is just tired of video calls. But it's nice that you were able to have some of that community. The Discord for I'm in the fellowship Discord very fortunately for because I gave a talk in that series you were mentioning. The fellowship Discord is like one of the busiest and liveliest Discords I think I'm in.
Yeah.
It's what is amazing is so a new fellowship batch has just started, and this was like there was a month or so in between the old one and the new one, and like even that time, all of the old fellows, like every single channel on here has unread messages from me at the moment, and that's yeah, there are a lot of channels. Neat. So, your main project was React Native.
Yeah.
What were you? Was there a particular like thing you were working on React Native?
So I got to design an app for the first time. I
Oh,
usually design my apps, but they actually never meet the mockups. Like it's a famous
right,
thing that what you design is not actually the famous product. But
right,
luckily, my the app I and my teammate designed actually was shipped. So it was an unreal experience because I have never shipped a mockup that I have made.
right.
And also I got to code a lot. I got to code the front end JavaScript part, and I got to code the migration of a complete project to a different repository, which was like a very large diff.
Right.
So yeah, you had to like work to like rigorously test so that you don't break everything at React
Awesome.
Native.
Cool. One second, sorry. We've got a guest issue. Um, so so you made an app for React Native as part of the React Native project. Like, what was the app?
So yes, it's called React Native Tester app. So
Okay.
it works in the Facebook pipeline or the React Native internal pipeline to test the new features of React Native to
Interesting.
see if they are actually working or not. So you get like it's like an app built for the developers who want an
Right.
instant lookup of the new React Native features, and you want to test the new features with the like continuous test. So it was basically
Fascinating.
that.
Huh, cool. So that sounds like really fun as an app because you have to, I guess you were just trying to hit as many React Native features as you could and get them all into this app. That sounds
Yeah.
super cool.
So we
Awesome.
had to
And
like refactor
so
the
the,
app.
oops, sorry, there's a bit of a delay between
So
us. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
it's okay. So we had to like refactor the complete app. So we had this very bare bones app that which was built when the React Native project which started at the time it started, and finally we had to like refactor it to a completely different app, and it was like a very amazing journey to like refactor such a big project.
Cool. That's awesome. So you also did a couple of hackathons throughout the fellowship, right? There was like one at the beginning and one at the end.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what were you building in those hackathons? Also, I guess like how did those hackathons work? Because again, this was part of the fellowship, so it was like the kickoff activity.
Yeah, first is like a kickoff activity so that you can bond with your team and you can gel along so that you can work together. Then we had this midway hackathon where after like 6 weeks of intense coding, you get a break from coding and you do a hackathon again.
Awesome. Very cool. Neat. And so what did you build in both of
So
those?
for the for the first hackathon, we built something called CSSify. As web developers, we know that most of us have to work with CSS on a day-to-day basis, but most of us dislike CSS, right? Because like
Right.
large bundles and large web app sizes. So we created this CSS framework, which would create a framework for you, like a custom small-scale framework. So a framework for building CSS frameworks for you, depending on the project.
Very cool.
So it was like a very like different thing from what I have done before. I have never actually worked on a CSS project
Right.
like on such a large scale, but this was like a very like different project that I did. And second project, like that project is very close to my heart, and I'll be also showcasing it here. It's called Incogly. So Incogly is like a video streaming platform or an interview platform which aims to remove bias from the interviews.
Hmm.
So the goal behind this project, I think we will cover that, but I'll
Yeah,
just
we can
give
get
like a
into that
brief
like
thing.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So it's basically like how we plan to obfuscate the images and create like a equal chance experience for everyone.
Hmm. Super cool. So should we get into Incogly then? Should we move over and start talking about that?
Yeah, sure. So,
Awesome. Cool.
so the motive behind this project was that my teammates and I they had like given various interviews before the MLH fellowship for
Hmm.
either internship or jobs. And we felt that either the interviewer was being biased towards us or he was biased against. Even though this may not have been the truth, but it's like a human mentality that if you like screw up in an interview, it's better to assume that the interviewer was biased against you.
Sure.
So,
And in a lot of
so
cases, like especially in our industry, it's an industry that has a lot of diversity challenges. So yeah, I think it's a totally. I've seen there's
yeah,
lots of projects like this that, for example, like trying to remove this stuff from like LinkedIn and from resumes. Um, so yeah, I think it is a very valid problem to solve.
yes. So what right? So what we actually did was, since we were amidst this pandemic and we were having these remote interviews, we thought that it was this perfect opportunity to create this project where we used like some machine learning to create like a mask over your face
Hmm.
while you were interviewing.
Oh, we may have just lost Sanskar. Are you back? There we go. I think you're back.
I
Sorry, so
think
we lost
I
you.
think there was some.
Yeah, I think we're having a couple of networking issues. Welcome to live streaming, folks, where things happen. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, we've
Can
got
you
a
hear me
big.
well?
I can, yeah. We've got a big delay, but that's, I guess, to be expected. So we lost you at the point where you were saying you use machine learning to put a mask over the video.
Yeah. So we basically use machine learning to like avatarify and create like lively characters over the person's face. So you could eventually you could also see his emotion to judge the vibe of how the interview was going. So you could
Right.
judge if the interviewer was being happy, sad, or you could basically get all the expressions. But
Hmm.
you are unable to judge whether like she's a female, male, whatever the race may be. You are not able to judge based on that. The
Right.
only thing now you can judge on is actually what the talent that the other person has.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now,
Awesome.
now one other issue was that you could argue that we could just turn off our video and we could have an audio call instead. But another problem was that I could probably having another person who's typing the code for me while I'm talking to you, right?
Right.
So, so we also created this feature where we would like judge if there's only one person in the frame and there's only one person to like avoid any misuse of this feature.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes sense. And is again like, whilst we're, I guess, like increasingly in a situation where in-person interviews aren't a safe thing to do, having more tools to conduct video interviews in like in a good way is always great. So do you want to walk? Do you want to show us the project? We can jump on a screen share.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see if the network handles this.
I hope it does. So, is
So
my
just a
screen
reminder
visible?
as it is. Yep, here we go. And just a brief reminder while we get into this, folks in the chat, remember you can throw questions in anytime. We will be watching the chat. So if you have questions about this project or any of Sanskar's experiences, throw them in. We're here to answer those. So yeah, we can see the screen. So this is the web page, right?
Yeah, this is the web page. We call it Incogly. So
Yeah,
if you want to like create a room to start interviewing, you can just click on create the room button
cool.
and you can enter a room name, probably like something like this.
Yeah,
And you can basically just, this will be the avatar which is masked on your face.
right.
And and you can basically share this link with the person who's uh, in your stream or who you want to like do the interview with.
Yeah, yeah. So you
The
said it's
cool
using.
thing,
Sorry, go ahead.
so right now it's not using any like machine learning or any other thing
Hmm.
because it's not, the session hasn't started yet. So
Okay.
once you get the other person, it will like create a blur on your screen where you are visible, and then the avatar will be tracked according to my features, and the features in the avatar will be changed according to the features it detects on you. And these avatars are also randomly generated so that, again, to eliminate any bias that
Yeah.
you may have using avatar customization.
Interesting, cool. And so you say it's using like machine learning to do that.
Yeah.
Like what kind of machine learning are you doing? Like what are you using a particular like library or algorithm to do that detection?
So I think we are using like TensorFlow JS
Cool.
on the front end. We are using React for all the like front end stuff,
Hmm.
and then we are using WebRTC and sockets and Node.js on the back
Awesome. Cool. Um, yeah, I guess it makes sense that you used React when you were going to be working on React Native all summer.
end.
Super cool. So is there like what was your like favorite part of working on this project? Is there any like part of the code or the project that you was like you really enjoyed working on?
Yes, I never used client-side machine learning before this project
Interesting.
because machine learning, by what I consider machine learning, is just like a black box
Right.
before this project. But
Right.
having these peers who have some experience can obviously, since you are in a restricted time period, since a hackathon is like a very adrenaline filled experience, and you have these mentors like Ayush who collaborated along us, and was also was my teammate, was experienced in machine learning, so he helped us integrate this model, and then we worked along. We did code pairing, and it was like a very different experience, and I was able to grasp a new concept and within a very limited time period also.
Awesome. Super cool. So my other like I guess set of questions about this is so this is a project you made during hackathon that you're obviously like continuing to work on.
Yeah.
I've always really struggled to do that personally. Like whenever I look back at hackathon code, as you said, it's like a time when you're like full of adrenaline and just trying to do things quickly. Like I imagine that there are lots of parts of this code that you look back on now and you're like, oh, we need to do that in a different way.
Yeah, actually, that is correct. So we have this issue where
Yeah.
we code it in React. You may have heard that you don't use class components anymore, right?
I have no, so I don't know anything about React. So,
Okay.
Ashu, please explain. So you don't, so a class component. Do you want to explain what a class component is and why we don't use them anymore?
Right. So I'll try to find a class component to
Sure.
see.
So on this show, we've done Joe learns Ruby. Now we're doing Joe learns React.
Okay. I'll try to find a class component.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Strangely, I can't find one anymore. I,
Someone's already fixed this issue.
yeah. Okay. I'll basically just show you what a class component is.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's always the way on when you're live streaming that you can never find what you're looking for the minute you need to show it.
Yeah. So yeah. So this is what we call a class component, right?
Okay.
In it starts with class and it has some inbuilt methods.
Right.
So uh, it's not used actually nowadays because you have these methods which were built when React started, and they have a tendency to create like memory leaks in your code,
I
and
see.
it's
Okay.
and using class components also makes it very difficult for the code to be maintainable. So
Interesting.
a new practice is called, or a widely used new practice is called functional components.
Okay.
So this is something that we didn't use since most of the examples that we found on WebRTC was class components, and it was an
Right.
adrenaline filled sprint that we were
Sure.
having. So it was just mostly copying some of the class based components. So we are working on like refactoring that.
Nice, that's awesome. And you've got an issue open for that and tagged as a good first issue for people.
Yeah,
Which this is like the ideal sort of good first issue, right? Where it's like it's a thing that requires you to get into the code and understand the code and to replace like basically just do a find and replace. You don't have to do like any super complex problem
yeah,
solving. So I'm guessing in most cases, from looking at that document you just showed me, that in most cases it is just like a straight swap out, and you don't need to really change the functionality, or you don't need to like refactor anything beyond like swapping class for function. Is that right?
yeah. And also there is a concept of this or self in JavaScript.
Okay.
There's
Yep.
it is like a bit different for functions and classes in React components. So you get to learn about that if you like do the migration, if you haven't
Awesome.
done it before.
Yeah.
But it
Learning
doesn't
about
have
this
like a
in JavaScript is always fun.
and
Okay.
it doesn't have like a very steep learning curve for you to
Sure.
actually contribute.
Awesome. And so you've got a couple of other good first issues on here as well. Do you want to walk us through some of those?
So yes, so this is actually an option to choose avatars, as you have seen that the core logic of implementing the avatars has been already implemented, but
Mhm.
right now we are like randomly generating it. But but we may also have an ability to like create a custom avatar. Like I may want to be like a green colored Hulk on my interviews. That's it.
Right, right. I see. Awesome.
So
That
the core logic
interesting.
is
Yeah.
already there. We
Yeah.
just need to do some minor tweaking on
Cool.
adding a customization interface.
Yeah. So what kind of options are you trying to expose in that customization interface? Like, do they get to choose from like the avatars you have in the system, or is it like they can upload them, or?
So actually, the avatar library that we are using is very verbose. You can
Cool.
actually customize everything based on the human face
Oh,
that was
interesting.
shown in the demo.
What
So
what
you
library is this?
have it. I think this is the correct spelling. Yeah. So
Huh.
this is like a component library where they have
Yeah.
like splitted the every detail into a separate component.
Yeah.
So, so I could be like a Hulk wearing an eye patch like Captain Fury or something in my interview.
That's super cool. Awesome. This is going to be at least once during every one of these live streams so far. I've had someone has shown me a project that I have to bookmark, and this is the first one for today. Um, super neat. Cool. Awesome. So, if folks wanted to get started with your project, aside from the good first issues, like how should they get going with like hacking on the project?
Uh, to actually start the project, it's very simple. You just clone it, you do an npm install,
Hmm.
and you do a simple script. It's
Yeah.
as simple as that.
Cool.
But to actually contribute, I always believe that it's a good idea to contribute to the documentation or like a code commenting, since when you are understanding the code, you need to actually, if there is, let's say, not enough commenting and you spend some time understanding a particular snippet, you always, the snippet is always linked to another snippet and another snippet, so you get some breadth of the project
Hmm.
while you also have a good contribution and not a spammy contribution
Cool.
to the repository.
Awesome. But yeah, I think that's great advice. We've had a lot of uh, there's a couple of bits of advice we've had on the show from people who work on open source that like is starting. We're hearing the same pieces of advice again and again, which is great because we get new viewers every time. But it's also like it's starting to feel like we need to put this
Uh,
advice out there in like another
yeah.
form because it's like so many common best practices that apparently like are just like not being followed by folks. So
Actually,
so go ahead.
this I have like a very strange story. So
Yeah,
I
go for it.
have my first pull request that I always refer when I'm telling
Yeah,
to someone. So I can probably
yeah.
share it
Find
with
it. That
you.
sounds great.
Let's see if I'm able to find it. So I'll just give a brief of what it did, what it actually did at the time. So this was this project where they had this simple HTML tag,
Hmm.
and you wanted to like, that project was focusing on aesthetics. I think it's
Right.
probably this. Uh, yeah, found it.
Chromebot.
Yeah. So I was working on this project called ChromeBot. So it was basically a Chrome extension to an artificial intelligence chatbot.
Cool.
But we wanted to make it as beautiful as possible. And as you can see, my first contribution was like a single heading was written in text. And
Right.
what I did was added some CSS like and I replaced it with like a community approved logo.
Cool.
So, so the how I actually got to know about the code was actually I had to dig into the code and see where the heading was written. I
Right.
had to see where the CSS files were linked and then replace it. Even though it was a very small issue, but it built on how I could contribute further to the project.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. For sure. And so how was the so this is FOSSAsia, which for people who don't know is like an enormous open source conference. It happens in
Yeah,
Singapore, right?
yeah,
Cool. So this is like quite a big organization to be doing, I guess, this bot in. So what was your experience of doing the pull request of this? Did you already contribute? Was this your first contribution to this project?
Yeah, yeah. It was my first contribution to open
Yeah.
source ever.
Nice, that's awesome. And did you talk to the maintainers before you started the project, or did you just went for it?
No, actually, it's a good idea to talk to maintainers
Hmm.
if it's possible. So I was in their messaging chat. It's posted on Jitter.
Cool.
So I asked if I saw this issue and I created this issue at the time,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
asked if it's a valid issue, and I believe, and since it was a simple swap, I thought then that I would be able to fix this issue, and
Yeah.
if I needed some help, maybe the mentors could guide me, and the mentors were very supportive since they were also like school students at the time.
Right.
It's the project of my friend, so
Cool.
he like helped me. He told me that yeah, go ahead, and if you face any difficulty, we'll help
Yeah.
you out. But it was like a fairly simple project, but you get the how you can dive into a large code base, and
Yeah.
the mentors will help you how you narrow down the issue, which is what matters more than you contributed.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think what you said earlier about it gave you like a reason to look through the code base and understand it and understand where things are happening was like a really
Yeah,
good one. It's one of the reasons I really like documentation contributions because you have to read the docs for the projects, which
yeah,
is a very useful thing to do before you contribute. Um, Super cool. So thank you for showing us those things. So now that you finished, so you finished with the fellowship, right? You graduated.
yeah.
Awesome. What's next? Are you back at school at the moment? Are you working on anything else?
Yeah, I'm back at school. I'm maintaining my like few open side projects. I'm
Cool.
trying to like push them over the line,
Right.
and I'm just like grinding lead code for now since
Yeah.
it's like requirement for job searching.
Right. Yeah, actually, I've heard this might be. I think a lot of our viewers on at the moment are also folks from India, but we have a lot of viewers from other parts of the world. And something that I've spoken to folks quite a lot about since I came to India for MLH is like actually just how different the job search environment is in India.
Yeah,
Because like the emphasis on competitive coding isn't as much of a thing in for example like where I studied like in the UK like we do bits of competitive coding but like it's not required for a job.
right.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about like leak code and like what job searching is like for you as a student?
Yeah, okay. So it's very different from what I've interviewed for international organizations, and they have
Yeah.
this take home test where you do their assignment, and
Yeah.
that's like unrelated to any competitive programming. You actually build a project and you
Right.
then do a code review like in MLH fellowship.
Yeah.
But in India, you have and any many big organizations. You have to have at least two or at least three rounds of data structures and algorithms
Hmm.
questions. So I never do competitive programming because it's something that doesn't interest me. But
Right.
doing a bare minimum of lead code or having a strong data structures foundation is a requirement,
Hmm.
uh, at least for most of the organizations I have interviewed with.
Interesting. And like, why do you think that is? Because like, I imagine, I'm like when we there's kind of like a joke about technical interviewing here, like in
Sure.
the UK and the US, where like you would do these like as you said, like reversing a binary tree on a whiteboard, and like you never use like those skills in the job. So why do you think that like the companies in India place such an importance on those algorithms questions?
Um, I highly agree and I highly support the statement that it's not required in a real job,
Yeah.
at least in most of the cases. But I think that it's like widely used because the population or the number of people that are applying to these jobs are like very large in number,
Right.
and
Right.
having these tests acts as a like a right filter to like so that you can like shaft out a lot of applicants, because if
Yeah.
you had to go through a lot of project repos and project demonstrations, then
Yeah.
it would be a like very difficult task to see the projects of like 1,000 people who are applying to these jobs.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess then we constantly talk about there being like a shortage of developers, especially in like the US economy. But I guess it's very much the opposite situation. I saw some like crazy figure once about the amount of CS grads in India versus US, where it's like a
Yeah,
lot more. Which yeah, must make it a tough competitive environment. So yeah, that's all the questions I had for you today. Is there anything else you wanna like tell the viewers, or anything else you want to chat about before we wrap up?
Uh, like there's this one advice that I
Yeah,
got from my mentor. I
sure.
actually tell it to everyone. Is that when you are at least in India, you when you join university, everything is like job, job, job.
Right.
You want to code so that you can get into Google. You want to code so that you can get into Facebook. But
Yeah.
it's something that I never did. I coded because it was my escapade or it was my way to
Right.
express myself. So uh, so there will be many people who like tell you do competitive programming or you don't have a future, or you do
Right.
something that they want to do, otherwise you don't have a future. And there's this quote by Stanley that if you truly believe in something and you truly have a passion for something, don't let a fool tell you otherwise.
Right.
So don't
Nice.
don't suc- don't succumb to anyone. Enjoy programming because that's the essence of it. And don't try to actually follow anyone because half the fun is in exploring new opportunities and
Yeah,
exploring
for sure.
what the journey may have for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's wonderful advice to end this segment on. So thank you so much, Sanskar, for joining us and showing us your project and walking us through what I think is hopefully a useful journey as a student, someone who's not studying main CS and has found a way to inject code into your education through these community programs. That's super rad. So I will kick you backstage now and do the outro stuff. So again, thank you so much, Sanskar. I
Thank
hope
you
you
so
enjoy the rest
much
of your
for
day.
having me on the show.
All right, thanks, man. Catch you later. So there you go, Rob. Thank you so much again for Sanskar for joining us. If you are interested in the project he showed, it is incogly.ml. I'll throw that in the chat again, or actually it's in the chat, so I'll put it on the screen. Super cool project. I am very into this idea of reducing the points in the job application process where there could be implicit bias happening. So that is removing it from the interview process and from especially like screener interviews. Like we have this kind of insidious notion of like the cultural fit that comes up a lot in tech companies, which is just a way of saying like we want people to join the company who look like us. So I think this project is super important and it's super neat that it came out of a hackathon, and I hope it continues. And so thank you so much, Sanskar, for showing us that. So what's happening for the rest of the day? We have a couple of things. One second. We have a couple of things coming up today. So this was our first show of the day. We have another show in about 2 hours and 40 minutes. That is our 4 p.m. Central European time show, the 10 a.m. EDT time show, and we're going to be joined by Penelope Fippen. I'm very excited for the show. I haven't spoken or caught up with Penelope in a million years, so I'm very excited. But Penelope Fippen, you may know her as a former maintainer of RSpec. She's an engineer at Stripe. She's working on Ruby format, and that is going to be a lot of what we're talking about. Ruby format is Penelope is basically trying to take Go format, which is like the standard tool built into the Go tool chain to auto format your Go, and trying to apply that same principle to Ruby, because Ruby has a couple of like auto formatters and these kind of things like Rubocop, but they're all really highly configurable. And one of the beautiful things about Go format is it's not configurable at all. So everyone in the language ecosystem has the same code standards. So she's trying to apply that to Ruby, which is super interesting and has a lot of interesting challenges. Like one of her goals for the project is for that to be super fast. And so a lot of what she's been dealing with is speed essentially, and trying to make sure that that is as fast as possible. So she's gonna be on the show, and I hope to extract all of this Ruby syntax horror stories from her. And then this afternoon, hopefully, we'll have Andrew Seward. We haven't heard from Andrew, so I hope he's still available and that he's okay. But if we do have Andrew this afternoon, we'll be talking about tech communities and how you can be a good member of a tech community, particularly around open source. We'll be talking about Tech Nottingham, his little community up in Nottingham, and I hope we get to talk about the bot that they built for that community that now has many functions. He's also been doing some fantastically hilarious events since they moved online. So we'll chat about all those kind of things. He's also a data product lead at Experian, so we'll talk a little bit about what his job entails and how you may also pursue such a career path. So that's our shows for today. If you want to see the full schedule for the week, you can go to twitch.tv, raise their schedule. Very excitingly, I got to add a new guest. We had some last minute bookings for Thursday, so for Fridays. No, yeah, for Thursday. So we now have a full day on Thursday, and we also got to catch up with some of the guests yesterday to kind of work out what we're going to do on the show. So tomorrow morning at this time slot, we have Flacky from the Mozilla community. He's also a freelancer, doing all kinds of weird things. So we're going to talk to him about basically being like a freelancer in developer open source community world, how he got into that, what kind of projects he does, and how you can achieve the same. But also, we're going to review an old Firefox OS app with Flacky, which is going to be fascinating. Firefox OS was discontinued a couple of years ago. It used to be this like amazing vision of a vanilla HTML JavaScript only mobile operating system where the apps were just web pages basically. I wrote a Firefox OS app like way back in the day. I had an old Fire phone kicking about. So we're going to look at that and kind of compare what apps then look like to apps now. So I'm really excited for that. A little bit of history there. We've also got Cybrand, who is going to be joining us on the EMEA slot. Cybrand is big into C++. So I'm excited. We've got a very C-packed show tomorrow. So we've got Cybrand joining us, who works on C++ stuff, and then in the afternoon we've got Shana Matthews. So I'm trying to find Cybrand's Twitter profile. Tartan Llama, there we go. And then in the afternoon we've got Shana Matthews, who's also going to be talking to us about C. We're going to look at one of Shana's old C apps, and we did a fun thing the other day with Sucrit, where we looked back at some of Sucrit's old code and kind of reviewed it in terms of what Sucrit knows now and improve the code. And so we're going to do the same thing with Shana with some C code she wrote during university, and now after a couple of years at Microsoft, we're going to be seeing what she thinks of her own code. And yeah, with Cybrand, Cybrand's a developer advocate at Microsoft on C++, and works on some super cool projects, including the C++ community include C++, which is a community aimed at kind of making C++ a more welcoming place. C++ being one of these like older language ecosystems that has some of that legacy of things that we as developer communities have tried to move away from a little bit now. So hopefully we'll hear a little bit about include, and some of the things that Sai has been working on that front. So that's our schedule for today and tomorrow. We've also got some great guests on Friday, but I'll talk about those later on in the week. We'll probably get into those maybe tomorrow. So yeah, if you have a question that you want to submit to the Hacktoberfest help desk, you can do that at raise.dev/Hacktoberfest. If you want to see a full video on how to submit a question to us and how that works, you can go to our videos page and look for the highlight. I recorded the highlight just for y'all, so you would know how to submit questions. The schedule for all those people I mentioned is at twitch.tv raisedev's schedule. We are next back in 2.5 hours with Penelope Phippen. That's going to be a great show. Please tune in. It's going to be another episode of Joe Learns Ruby. And if you are interested in leveling up your career and getting coaching to help with that, you can find us at raise.dev, where we are free whilst we're in early access. We have some wonderful coaches. We had a bunch of coaches join this week. We got to meet them on Monday. They're super, super awesome people that I look forward to you all meeting. So that's all from me in this slot. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for your time. And if you join us in a couple of hours, we'll see you with Penelope Phippen at 4 p.m. Central European Time, or 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.